We have with us Mariel Milano, who's the Director of Digital Curriculum, Orange County Public Schools, good friend of ours forever. She's going to talk to us about No Student Left Unplugged, launching and sustaining one-to-one in a large urban school district. Mariel, I'm going to pass you presenter rights, and I do see your mic is live, so you can present directly. There, you have rights now if you want to share screen. You can also share your webcam if you want to. You don't have to. And it's so good to have you with us. There, I see your screen. No student left unplugged. This is awesome. Speak up so I make sure I can hear you. Something going on with your audio. Muriel, we're not hearing you. Can you go to your audio panel in the webinar and check and make sure that the audio is on the right sort of mode for you? Okay, now I hear you.
Perfect. All right.
Perfect.
Let's go ahead and get started.
Perfect.
So I'm going to be sharing today about No Student Left Unplugged, which is our Launched Ed Digital Learning Program, and Maurice and I kind of decided to tag team this so that I'll share the first part about kind of how we got to our big pivot in March, and then Maurice will be sharing kind of the second leg of our journey. So we kind of put these two pieces together. So for those of you who are familiar with Orange County Public Schools, we are in Orlando, Florida, and our goal is to be the top producer of successful students in the nation. And we have been on a journey to do that with digital learning, and we felt that we would be able to increase student engagement and achievement by personalizing learning for all students through the use of digital content and tools. But just because we started this journey maybe a little earlier than others, pre-pandemic, didn't mean that we certainly didn't have a lot of pain points along the way. So we are now the 8th largest school district in the country. We typically have about 212,000 students. Right now we have about 206,000. And we have a couple of key challenges that for us framed both our response to hybrid learning and our response to one-to-one in general. So first off, our district is very mobile, especially prior to the pandemic. We have a huge hospitality community and a pretty vibrant migrant community as well. And about 25.49% of our students don't start and end the school year in the same place. And that probably sounds not too bad, but when you consider state testing and things like that, it's quite a challenge. Some of our schools actually have over 100% mobility in the same year. We also have a poverty rate of about 39%, but that doesn't tell the whole story because the poverty rate and the free and reduced lunch rate are a little different. And so over 73% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. Add to that we have just over 200 schools, with 127 of them alone being elementary schools, and 199 countries and 164 languages and dialects. And so you're probably thinking like, well, what does all that have to do with one-to-one? Well, quite a bit actually, because we decided that we wanted to create an equitable learning environment for all students and really allow for students to be able to pick up where they left off, no matter if they went to one school, 12 schools, the worst zip code, the best zip code, or if even in a pandemic, they were actually coming in and out of the experience. And we were on track to do that. We felt pretty good about our progress. We had rolled out about 6 cohorts of one-to-one, and then Corona came. And we love ourselves some Rona, and we had to kind of back up from our one-to-one by 2021 goal, and that quickly became one-to-one by 2020. And we had to accelerate 2 whole cohorts to be able to make that happen in time for our students to really need that. So what makes our approach to one-to-one and hybrid learning maybe different? Well, I think first of all, for us, it's the why. Our why behind integrating technology into the classroom is we want our students to be able to have really a market differentiator of an experience in our schools versus other public schools. We want to focus on college and career readiness. We want to make sure that we're not just deploying technology for the sake of technology, but we are focused on the Florida standards and using technology to meet those needs through our instructional framework strategies, and that really we're just shifting that major tool of instruction to digital curriculum. So another thing that sets us apart, I believe, in terms of our implementation is that we see the LaunchED digital learning program even before this tumultuous time as a school transformation model, and even more so now in our current state of affairs. So I think schools, and I think Leilani, you were just talking about this, schools are often surprised by how many things really change when you go one-to-one or when you fully immerse yourself in a digital environment. Oftentimes people think of it as just the tools, but it's truly not. It's how the curriculum is designed first and foremost, how instruction is delivered, how that technology infrastructure on your campus is built to support that, the instructional systems that are used, the way classroom assessment occurs, and even the way that accountability happens in the school setting. So I just want to talk you through a couple key points that have been kind of touchstones for us over the last few years, and especially in the last 6 months. So our first kind of big touchstone has been around curriculum and curriculum design and understanding how and why technology relates to our Florida standards. So we often say in our district that the textbooks are not the curriculum, which is confusing to many, but we say the standards are the curriculum. And by that we mean that we don't teach textbooks or LMS courses or anything else cover to cover. We look at pulling in a broad array of resources to meet the Florida standards. So if that's kind of our frame, then how do you really know which standards require technology to teach? It's easy to say all of them because we're doing remote learning, but that's really not the case. There's still a place for paper and manipulatives, even in a hybrid environment. And so we really look at our standards and we identify and pull in technology through those English language arts standards first and foremost, because many people are surprised, maybe even some on this call, that in our current Florida standards, technology or digital resources are required in over 40 standards K-12 to meet the full depth of the standards. And many of those are actually around the planning and production and distribution of writing. I was thinking of that domain. And also speaking and listening and informational text, which kind of carries us across all of the subject areas. So we like to tell our teachers, and I think really what we've centered our LaunchED digital learning program around is that we are in the business of creating future publishers and writers and communicators, because that's what you need to be a productive citizen. And that today's students don't need to make book reports and dioramas. They need to be able to engage in dynamic research and create interactive presentations that are tailored to their audience. So kind of changing that writing cycle to research, create, and present. To support students in the active use of technology and digital resources, the LaunchED program provides over 75% of our instructional materials in a digital or electronic format, and all of our core instructional materials are in an electronic format. So this was really helpful to us during that pivot because our teachers and students already were familiar with and understood how to access all of those materials at home. That includes on-demand access to things like our e-textbooks, as well as purchase resources such as some of the ones you see on the screen that we purchase at an enterprise level and kind of pull back a little bit of funding from each school to ensure that all of our students have that same access and all of our teachers have the same access to course design resources. So I am a firm believer, and Maurice will tell you I'm incredibly passionate about the fact that our program needs to represent interactive and active digital learning that inspires collaboration and really extends the value beyond the four walls of the classroom. But In saying that, I am absolutely not an advocate for paperless learning, even in a pandemic. And I believe that our teachers should continue to be encouraged to select and choose the materials that are most appropriate for the format of the lesson and the developmental appropriateness for the student. So here's a perfect example. Even when we were immersed in this hybrid environment, we encouraged our kindergarten and first grade teachers to send home individual packets of manipulatives and key texts that students needed to be able to develop concepts of print. Because to us, the important thing isn't that we're just simply moving one functionality to another, it's that we're really choosing the right way to go digital and we're not becoming what I like to call tradigital. So this is our digital curriculum progression, and one of the things I think that became a key question for us when the school shutdowns happened was, did all of this get just blown up and we were going to be 100% digital everywhere? And I don't think we were, and I think you'll hear more about that from Maurice. We really still focused on making sure, yes, every student has a device in their hand and at their disposal, but our elementary school students are still getting about 75% of their day with the opportunity to interact and be able to touch and feel tangible things. Our middle school students being able to, yes, attend all their classes virtually, but still have access to some physical materials. But then at the high school level, really looking at pulling back the vast majority of that, and even when attending asynchronous classes, probably only really doing offline work about 25% of the time. So that hopefully just kind of helps capture what I was saying in a pretty easy slide. So it does take, though, more than digital curriculum to be able to transform learning, and it is going to take kind of a specific shift in instruction. So we view our model as blended. We encourage our teachers, whether in a face-to-face, hybrid, or remote environment, to be able to use technology every day in small group, whole group, and individual instruction. But we believe strongly in it being facilitated by an in-person teacher. And so in the past, of course, that would have meant coming into the school and doing that face-to-face. And then you'll hear from Maurice a little bit more about how we're doing that in a remote environment. But to us, this is really the key distinction between something like a Florida virtual school or an Orange County virtual school. We want to make sure that our teachers and our in-person connections are still at the forefront of our work. We would describe our blended learning model as pretty wholly rotational. Particularly, we use the station rotation, flipped classroom models, and individual rotation models. We don't really use the lab rotation models anymore now that we're one-to-one. In most of our Launchpad classrooms, each lesson begins with whole group instruction, but then students are able to engage in either flipped learning or independent learning, dependent on their subject area. And even in the times of COVID, we are still heavily using things like breakout rooms and channels to be able to facilitate that small group interaction. It has taken a tremendous amount of professional development to be able to get our teachers to this point over the last 6 years, and we did even more professional development that you'll hear a little bit more about once we began the pandemic. So up until the COVID crisis, we had already completed 4 years of professional development with all middle school and high school teachers on how to be able to use technology through gradual release, differentiated instruction, flipped instruction, rotation, and personalized learning, albeit in a face-to-face environment. And then for our elementary teachers, for at least a third of them, we had completed at least 2 years of that professional development as of March. So that kind of took us right to that precipice. And then we were able to pivot and kind of look at this professional development program and see how we could refine it to support hybrid learning. Whether it is face-to-face or hybrid, our program wouldn't be successful at all without robust technology infrastructure. So we prioritize using our E-rate funding to place a wireless access point in every instructional space. We also prioritize retrofitting the wireless backbone to a fiber optic backbone in our older schools and increasing the bandwidth out to the internet to all of our schools at a consistent rate. And we have actually increased our bandwidth probably almost 100 times over at this point over the six years from where we were 6 years ago. And then we also have a program that puts roughly 24,000 hotspots in the hands of students in need so that when they are traveling to and from school, learning from home, or wherever they are able to also connect and keep that learning continuous. Probably, I think our biggest lesson learned when we started one-to-one, and this lesson continues to be the one that keeps giving even throughout remote and hybrid instruction, is that our internet filtering needs to be both nimble, robust, and ubiquitous. Those are my 3 favorite words right now. So we provide internet filtering on our devices 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, no matter what SSID you're connected to. On any location or any provider, and all traffic is routed back through our OCPS SIPA compliant filter so that we can monitor traffic and we don't allow our students to use devices for non-academic purposes. In addition, we now ensure that internet history cannot be deleted, and recently we implemented forced login to Google Chrome so that personal accounts cannot be used. When school is in session, we complement our use of devices by also installing interactive smart panels, desktop presentation stations, audio enhancement in the ceiling, and document cameras. Each of these things play a very different role in face-to-face instruction than they do hybrid instruction. But one thing that's kind of neat is that we were able to find ways to leverage all of these things in hybrid and remote instruction. We were even able to kind of be nimble enough in our practice that we were able to allow our teachers, if they chose to check out our document cameras and monitors and things like that and bring them into their homes to set up their own classrooms. In our self-contained ESE classrooms with students that have significant cognitive and physical disabilities, we're also the largest owner of intended touch platforms in the United States. They're ADA compliant interactive surfaces that are kind of like a smartboard, but they allow for a wheelchair to pull up under them, and they are able to raise and lower and change the angle of inflection so that you can sit underneath of it or use it with a ball, a switch, a helmet, however you need to be able to access that if not doing it through touch. And it can support up to 4 students around it at the same time. At the beginning of our program, we tested a large number of form factors and products to be able to really think about the teaching and learning side of what we were doing. And after that, we kind of settled on a feature set. And so many times people say to me, hey, Marielle, in the middle of all you're doing, are you only using Lenovo? And we're like, no. And they're like, okay, well, you're using HP then. And we're like, well, so we don't actually have a single vendor. Every year we go back out for competition, and currently we have HP, Lenovo, and Dell in our schools, in addition to iPads and K-1. So we have Windows 10 as our platform, and then we make sure every device has at least a 10-inch screen, webcam, microphone, and speakers. And then in grades 6 to 12, it is a convertible touchscreen unit as well. I should also say that we do support BYOD in all schools as well. It's typically used by less than 1% of families. However, if you are in the market, we do have a device refusal form, and then parents are encouraged to bring in their own device, and we provide classroom management software for the device to be able to bring it into our network. And then as long as it has the same features, they can use it on campus. From an instructional systems point of view, I like to say we focus on the Super 7, and some of these have changed a little bit in the last 12 months or so. But in general, our Super 7 is Launchpad, which is our single sign-on platform, LandSchool, which is our classroom management platform, G Suite, which is our cloud storage and production platform, Canvas, our LMS, our smart board and the accompanying smart tools, as well as our Follett Destiny or Destiny Discover ebook collection. We've recently transitioned away from Safari Montage and are now bringing that learning object repository into our Canvas Commons. All of our students use Google Apps for Education, and our teachers have a combination of Office 365 and Google Apps for Education. But the reason that we do that isn't so much the cloud platform, it's again that equity and accessibility. So our students all have access to Read and Write for Google and the Immersive Reader from Microsoft, which allows for them to be able to access all digital content. And the really wonderful thing about the Immersive Reader and Read Write for Google right now, which is different than it was pre-pandemic, is they now both work inside of Canvas. And so they're allowed, our students can actually use those tools to be able to hear, have read to them, translate all of the content inside of our teacher-designed courses within the LMS. Our Launchpad, which is our gateway to digital learning, has these numbers are clearly old, but after the pandemic they've skyrocketed. But even as of last year, we had over 150,000 logins daily and 20 million plus application launches since 2015. Maurice will tell you the numbers now, and they are staggering. Our IMS is a one-stop shop that is now both embedded into Canvas and a standalone site so that teachers can get the resources right when they need, no matter where they are. And to date, we have well over probably 50,000 resources at this point that are vetted by our curriculum team, including daily lesson plans for teachers and over 70,000 curated digital resources for teachers to use in every course. From an assessment perspective, even during the pandemic, we have our students take their assessments on their district-provided device, which is a huge benefit for us because it allows us to recapture more instructional time, and it also allows students the comfort level of knowing intimately how the device they're testing on works. From an accountability perspective, over the last 5 years, we've asked our principals to be able to rate and kind of inventory where their school is using the Technology Integration Progress Survey, and they look at where the majority of their teachers' lessons are observed and written from the spectrum of entry through transformation. In addition, we do some more operational things, of course, like a 3 times annual device inventory and a fine structure that ensures a behavioral deterrent for misuse of the device. So I think where I want to end is kind of talking about how we got here, because this is going to, I think, lead directly into our pivot point. We were a Gates Master Planning for Innovation grant awardee several years ago. And at the time that we became a Gates Master Planning for Innovation awardee, I mean, quite frankly, we had a good technology program, but we didn't have a scalable technology program. And what we got out of that program was something that didn't sound sexy, but was definitely needed. And that was an understanding of how to govern and develop systemic processes and procedures around remote, hybrid, personalized digital learning, to really think about how to scale innovation. And we were able to really look at and take our organization into 3 chunks: strategic, tactical, and transactional. And in looking at those 3 chunks, we were able to create a governance structure that was led by our deputy superintendent that allowed for tactical working groups in the area of teaching and learning, communications, legislation, ITS, facilities, finance and procurement, and asset and risk management. Now, in the first probably 3 years of implementation, these groups were meeting bi-weekly all the time to kind of get everything set. Now they meet as needed, but their job is to really codify and make sure that everything we do with digital curriculum is documented in a playbook for our schools. The Gates grant allowed us to take all of our foundational capabilities as an organization that all of you have and really break those down into functional capabilities for digital learning, and take those functional capabilities and document the processes behind them and the procedures. Those could then be decomposed into different forms of documentation for schools. Now, That doesn't sound that exciting and sexy, but let me tell you what it really looks like. So when we were able to pivot to hybrid learning, we already had the LaunchEd toolkit built out. And this for our principals was a one-stop shop that they could go to be able to find processes, procedures, and policies for digital learning. And so you can see here that on the right are all of the forms that they need. There are some helpful links. And then all of our processes and procedures we've used over the last several years are inside of these different buckets. So you can see that it is organized by the time of the year that they need these procedures and kind of goes through everything through how do you check out a device, through bring your own device, hotspots, digital literacy courses, so forth and so on. This year, for the pandemic, which I think will kind of nicely dovetail into Maurice's portion of things, we were able to use this same structure that we've been working with, that governance structure, to create a new substitute toolkit that would support our principals and teachers in being able to actually effectively scale substitute instruction during hybrid and remote learning, which a lot of other school districts just couldn't take on because they didn't have that that backbone, I think, or that prior structure around processes and procedures in that area. So we were able to kind of easily pivot and create ways using Nearpod for Subs and our web conferencing platform for students to continue to be able to have live instruction delivered to them. So here's just a quick example of what that looks like. So these are our quick cards, which are basically something that a substitute can pick up when they walk in the door to a school from the front office. And we were able to take our kind of high-level process maps and turn them into basically what's really technical documentation for subs that shows them step-by-step how to launch and deliver instruction when they are alone in a classroom with kids at home. So I can assure you that in my entire career, I never thought that's what I would be doing. But I think that what I have learned from this process is that it has been so critical for us to be able to continue to build on our established governance practices so that we can effectively support our schools in remote and hybrid learning. So I'll take any questions you have while Maurice maybe gets set up. And Leilani, you can pass the buck to him.
Okay, great. Hi, Maurice. And we did have a question from Natalie Wanamaker from Pasco. Natalie, you're unmuted if you want to ask your question.
Hi, I just wanted to ask the management software that you guys use for the BYOD. You said you guys had something to manage the devices. What is that?
Yeah, so we're actually, in our current environment, we provide our parents with the package for Land School to install on their own devices at home. And the assistant principal needs to check that it's installed before the device comes onto campus. And then the teacher can load their computer with their regular roster file and be able to see and control the student's computer.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so if there's no other questions, or if there are, just please type them in the question panel or raise your hand. Maurice, hello. I'm going to make you presenter. And Marielle, thank you so much. This was awesome. You know, I'm always so thrilled to hear all of the progress and all of the, you know, activities that you guys are doing. It's just really, you know, this is huge. Really, it's a complex scene, and you guys have risen to the challenge. So I'm very proud. Hi, Maurice. Looks like you're self-muted, and I have passed you presenter status. So there you are.
All right, I'm going to see if I can do this correctly, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for next year when we do another tour, hopefully we'll be, coming back to Orange County next year so we can be live and in person, in the fall. But we're probably going to be switching to another platform for the spring virtual meetings that we'll be doing, because people are just not familiar with GoToWebinar. But I can see your screen now, so we're good to go.
All right. So, and I apologize. I wanted to share my video, but my camera is my only microphone working right now. So I have to lean in closer to it. So I would share my video, but then you would just get a really close-up view of my face. So for right now, I think I'm just going to share my audio if that's okay.
That's perfect.
All right. So thank you, Marielle, for the information you shared. And I think, as she said, this is going to be around our transition from blended to distance to then remote learning in Orange County Public Schools. And a lot of what Marielle shared really served as the foundation for that transition. So I'll skip over some of these next slides very quickly because some of it was shared in what Marielle shared. But overall, I did want to let you all know that Marielle and I are sharing, but there are a lot of other folks who are really critical to the what we're going to share, what we are sharing today. The first at the top there is Rob Bixler. He's our Associate Superintendent of Curriculum and Digital Learning. Marielle just shared, who's the Director of Digital Curriculum. And then we also have Marcella Wheeler, the Director of Instructional Systems, and Allison Kibbe, the Director of Instructional Technology and Library Media, who's the last photo there. And I don't think I shared my official title. I'm the Senior Director of Digital Learning. So as Marielle shared, we are not strangers to digital learning. We started the Launcher program in 2013 with that focus on becoming the top producer of successful students in the nation. And part of that key strategy was digital learning and increasing student engagement and achievement by really personalizing learning for all our students through digital content and tools. We had a strong start with digital learning that Marielle shared, and we also faced some really key challenges. I won't spend too long on this slide because I know that you were looking at some of the numbers that we have and some of the really great diversity that we have that is wonderful for our district, and it also creates challenges. Even with that, though, we still believe that we want to provide all our students with a future-ready education regardless of their zip code. So by providing a digital device, a centralized dashboard for resources, and access to anytime, anywhere learning is helping us level the playing field and ensure that no matter how many schools or what the socioeconomic status of a student is, they are able to get the same high level quality of education. So when we look at our LaunchEd program, we started off with about 8,000 devices in the first cohort, and we did our rollout in cohorts of about 40 to 50 schools at a time to make sure that we could manage all of the infrastructure and other changes that took place as part of giving this school a device. I think the first cohort was actually only around 7 schools, but then from there we quickly ramped up. We now are at over 180,000 devices that are Windows, about 30,000 or so that are iPads. So we easily have close over almost 200,000 devices that are in students' hands at this time. We were committed as we were going through to be fully one-to-one by 2021. It was our slogan that we used, as Marielle shared. And then we had to pivot. And that pivot, of course, was because of the pandemic. So in mere weeks, we had about 2 more cohorts left that we were going to implement. And we went from a 2-year plan to, in mere weeks, providing devices to 70,000 more students to get them to one-to-one by August of this year instead of 2 years away. We wanted to make sure that even though we were accelerating and pivoting, that we were still maintaining the momentum. And when we made our pivot to asynchronous distance learning in the spring of 2020, we had to ultimately again pivot to remote learning in the fall of 2020. Through both of those pivots, we had to focus on 3 levers. The first one was really capitalizing on communication. The second was providing professional development and training. And the third was investing in our instructional systems. So I'm going to go through a little bit with all 3 of those. First, during the spring. We capitalized on some of our existing communication strategies and structures that we built through Launchpad. And then we also designed custom websites for families and also started, very importantly, a social media campaign. First, the website. The distance learning website provided a one-stop shop for families to check daily with clear and concise information about our instructional continuity plan, student grades, meals, and even more information. We had over 17,068 families view the website in the first 30 days that it was up. We paired the standard website features with responsive additions, such as we had live stream distance assistance one-on-one videos. These videos tackled topics that families were struggling with, like exceptional student education, learning spaces at home, and connectivity. And we updated that information daily based on the current sentiments from the community to make sure that we were increasing traffic and really addressing what was needed at that time. The distance assistant tips that we created, we also recycled them into social media posts for the hashtag OCPS Distance Assistance campaign. This included daily posts on Facebook and Twitter that had links back to the website. So for example, the post centering on planning your week, it took families back to the main distance learning website where they could find curated templates and videos to help them do just that. Over the course of 2 months, we posted 45 tips and we reached over 691,480 users. And we had an engagement of about 40,774 users. The district also worked to provide staff support and training through really a 2-pronged approach. 1, on-demand distance learning support, and 2, with weekly live trainings. The on-demand support was provided in the form of a Canvas course that had quick tips and resources. Topics included collaboration in Canvas, communication, content creation, monitoring, and support. We tried to make sure we strategically identified key tools in our learning management system that could quickly be used by teachers to collaborate with both students and with staff. We also specifically identified the creation tools that could be used within the learning management system in a distance learning format. For monitoring, we focused on the software tools that could provide a variety of assessment options for students. It quickly became apparent, however, that many staff, especially those who were not yet one-to-one when the pandemic occurred, needed more intensive support. For our learning management system, we developed a support website, we updated guides, and we promoted telephone and chat options for teachers who really needed that additional help. We also instituted weekly trainings by area. So trainings on how to be a virtual principal, for example, were added through a partnership with Orange County Virtual School, as well as in-depth training on the use of web conferencing for exceptional student education staffing specialists, guidance counselors, and registrars. Staff was able to attend live, they were able to pop in for office hours, or they were able to watch recorded sessions. We had over 13,000 staff that were trained at least once during those initial weeks in April. All the trainings that we did were recorded, and then they were shared back with teachers so that they could find on-demand help. The slide that you're seeing now is one of over 16 pages of recordings and information that we shared back with teachers. So this investment in human capital and communication led to some welcome consequences. One of them was increased usage in our 3 core instructional systems. First one being the Canvas, which is our learning management system. The second one, our video conferencing tool at the time, Big Blue Button. And then the third one being our digital dashboard, ClassLink Launchpad. This was also, however, quite honestly, a shock to the system. As, for example, with web conferencing, we saw a jump from 10 simultaneous sessions happening at a time to over 5,000 concurrent sessions happening at one time, basically overnight. As we saw teachers and students also began to use Canvas in very new patterns. So some of these consequences were easier to mitigate, others were harder to predict. So going back to Canvas, before we saw a traffic pattern that was staggered based on the bell schedule, but all of a sudden when we went into the pandemic, we all of a sudden noticed that almost all students, whether it was a elementary, a middle, or high school student, were logging in around 9 a.m. For like a 9 a.m. power hour, when that suddenly put a whole lot more stress on the systems than what they were used to. So our pivot to distance learning, while ultimately it ended up being successful and we were able to support what was needed by our students, teachers, and parents, it also created 3 key lessons for us. Number one, we needed to make sure that when we went into the fall, that if we had to go into a distance or remote learning situation again, that we had to anticipate what would be our potential areas of failure. 2, we had to plan and train and do support really in waves to make sure that as folks were going into different stages of their remote and distance learning implementation, that we could support that. And 3 was really around creating redundancy in our systems. And we really spent much of this summer working on strategies to address each of these items. So in late July, based upon decisions that were made by the state, we as a district finalized our strategy for opening schools in August. And we used the lessons we learned from the spring to pivot how we would do now synchronous remote learning. For the first week of back to school, starting around August 10th, students were all at home attending live lessons. After the first week, parents either elected to send their students back to school face-to-face or keep them home using a synchronous model that we dubbed Launch It at Home. And we had over 60% of our parents choose the Launch It at Home model for their child. So once the school year began, we doubled down on really consistent communication for families that selected Launch It at Home. We transitioned the content from our distance learning website to our department website, and we expanded our initial social media campaign to include live streaming, to include groups, to include curated media, and to also include events. And these were all really important components to have, because there were some parents who during the spring, they did not actually have teachers that heavily used technology with their student. They may have had packets that were sent home, paper packets, but that was not an option now. So we had definitely higher engagement and a higher need for support by parents for those who were now interacting very deeply with digital components for the first time. We also had to expand our training. So we created an asynchronous course for all instructional and administrative staff. We had synchronous weekly training webinars, synchronous weekly office hours, one-on-one support appointments. We created a Launch It at Home Facebook group and started sending out weekly teacher tech tips via e-newsletter. So first with that course, during pre-planning, all our teachers were auto-enrolled in a Launch It at Home course. This course provided an overview of our Launch It at Home model for synchronous instruction. It had guidelines and procedures, and it was training on how to set up your classroom and really best practices for teaching and learning in a Launch It at Home classroom. This really allowed teachers to teach with confidence during the first week at home and to be prepared to pivot to at-home instruction when needed due to an outbreak or quarantine. And this continues to help us till today. You may have even seen in the papers where we've had recently a couple of our schools that have had to pivot to Launch It at Home due to quarantine implications for them. We also added onto the dashboard for teachers a support icon. That support icon that was there from the spring, it really expanded to include more detailed options for one-to-one support, such as chat channels, web conferencing, self-paced courses, additional webinars, and vendor training. So we really wanted to ramp up the support that we were giving, because we knew that there were teachers that, and students and parents, as I shared before, that were now really deeply engaging in the use of these digital resources and platform for an extended period of time in a way that they did not do either in the spring or previously when we were only doing face-to-face instruction. And you can see an example on the screen here of just some of the different pathways for support that we even separate into elementary and secondary support or digital learning lab days. We also created a Facebook group for teachers. It was developed where teachers could share ideas and they could get information directly from the district. Each post was tagged and sent to staff internally to respond. On this slide here, it shows that this was from a couple weeks ago, we had over 1.4 thousand members inside of that Facebook group. And this really allowed us to target, when we went back and we talk about the tips and things like that, I'll talk about more in a little bit, really start to target some of those things based upon the feedback that we were seeing from teachers inside of this group. Teachers receive a weekly tech tip that is also coordinated with support and parent tech tips. The weekly email also included recorded classroom snippets of the tech tips in action and guides and tutorials to provide further support. One of the things that we learned and we have adjusted with our tech tips is that sometimes the support options that are needed come in waves. You may have folks who initially are just at that baseline of wanting to learn about the different systems that you have. But then as school goes on, you may now have a greater interest, for example, in doing breakout rooms or in doing content sharing based upon the feedback that teachers are getting from their administrators or just based upon what they are trying to do themselves. And so this provided us a really great way to make sure that we were providing just-in-time information back to teachers when we saw a topic rise up through the different communication channels we had. And we also wanted to make sure that as we were sharing this information out, if we were sharing something to parents, it was the same thing that was shared to teachers, so that none of our internal staff was caught off guard by something that was shared with parents that now parents were asking them about. In the spring, our investment in communication and training really increased system usage. To accommodate that, we had to spin up an additional web conferencing platform, Microsoft Teams, and that became important just as in the spring we saw that jump from around 10 concurrent sessions to around 5,000 concurrent sessions at a time. When school started, we saw a jump to around 8,000 concurrent sessions happening at one time, and that's just a massive load on any system that's out there. And so having Microsoft Teams as an additional option has really helped us to make sure that we're balancing that out for teachers and for students who may be at home. We also increased server capacity overall inside of all of our servers. We had to look at where we had potential weak links. For example, the place that folks go to log in, to make sure that that was really supported, that we had redundancy where we had internal and external ways of managing that traffic, where if we had any problems inside the network, we could quickly transition to outside of our school network or to a cloud infrastructure to help with that. One of the things that we knew was going to be a place that we had to really anticipate and make adjustments is with video conferencing. So one of the things we could not control, but we wanted to adjust for, is that one, teachers, they wanted to see all of their students when they were on video conferencing, but we also knew that video conferencing where all the students could see each other may end up chewing up the bandwidth of the student at their home, because you may have multiple students at home using that bandwidth to do video conferencing at the same time. So we made a change with one of our vendors, Big Blue Button, where it reduced the number of cameras shown to students from 25 to 5 to manage the bandwidth on the student end, but all of the students were still visible to teachers, to the teacher. And then we also really coordinated, for example, with Canvas and with our other vendors to really manage traffic. Because we knew 60% of our students were now online, we knew that there would just be these tremendous waves of traffic that would be sent to servers. And so we literally sent out our bell schedule to the different vendors we worked with and said, we're letting you know ahead of time, around 10:30, you're going to see this huge rush, because this is when middle school is changing or high school is changing. Make sure that we're ready for that. We also really worked on security. We really made sure that we really tried to make sure that we were fine-tuning the authentication requirements and implementing some universal things such as lobbies and web conferencing to make sure that the online classroom environment was as secure as possible when compared to what would be expected in the face-to-face environment. So I know I just shared a lot, but just to kind of do a quick recap, we made sure that we capitalize on communication. We provide training and invested in our instructional systems, and then all of those things really helped us to effectively and efficiently scale up. Mariel is still on the line here, and we would be really happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Yeah, I think the first question comes from your peer, Dr. Connie Colosi. Connie, you can unmute.
Hey there.
Hey, Connie.
Hello.
Hey. So I'm looking at all this amazing information that you've put together for communicating with families and teachers and staff. What is your support staff or your instructional staff, developer staff, or the people that are kind of on hand to hold hands with for teachers?
So it's different, right? So I do the parent support piece. So I'm kind of a one-man show when it comes to that. And then Allison's team, which is, I'm trying to think now, Maurice probably knows the exact number, but it's under 10 people, right? They have a support staff that can help teachers directly and plan training and conduct training. And then Marcy's team also has a smaller staff, but about 5 people that focus heavily on Canvas and iPads and things like that. So relative to the size of our district, it's actually a really small team. There's actually quite a few smaller districts that have a larger team than us. But that's how we manage it. So I do the parent support, I do a lot of the student support. Allison's team does media specialists and teacher support, and Marcy's team does Canvas and iPad support.
Thank you.
And I think, yeah, thank you, Mariel. I think that, you know, part of why we really try to use some of these scalable ways of providing support. So for example, when you look at the Facebook group, one of the nice things that's inside of there is that, yes, there are only a couple of staff members that are there providing, you know, some initial communication. But with over 1,000 members, you can have a lot of content knowledge that can be shared by others who are within the district that would be able to answer a fellow educator's question. So really trying to find ways that we could either scale up the platforms that we're using that would allow co-help, or to scale up the resources that we made available, and really to try to work on making those resources discrete. So the teacher tech tips, for example, we could do an entire training on video conferencing that would include breakout rooms as a component, and folks came to that. But then when it came time where breakout rooms really became a hot topic, that ability to send out that tech tip that really focused on breakout rooms helped a lot with that support part, because it really was providing just-in-time support for folks.
Connie, I know something that helped as well that we've never really tried before with all of our vendors is, like, in the Facebook group, we actually invited some of our professional development partners from our different contracts in as moderators. So for example, Michelle Moore with Nearpod is one of our contacts, and so now every time a teacher goes in and tags a post as Nearpod, whether it's to brainstorm ideas or troubleshoot or whatever that individual needs, in addition to their peers, as Maurice was mentioning, which truly I think is the most powerful support structure, Michelle is tagged in on those as well, and they were able to help broaden our base, you know. And I think that's important, because for years I always hoped our department, you know, would expand, but you know, you get to the point where you're never going to be able to truly expand in a mega large district to the scale you need. So that was a helpful process for us.
Yeah, that's a helpful thing for me to think about. Thank you.
Well, awesome.